For years now, I've been telling myself I wasn't going back to Golden Demon. And to be fair, I had good reasons. Golden Demon demands a level of focus that doesn't always fit the way I enjoy this hobby. And while other painters spend hundreds of hours pushing a single miniature to perfection, I've spent the last few years painting whatever inspired me. I like being able to wake up in the morning and decide that today I'm painting a salamander with a sponge, paint a million scratches on a space wolf, or create some bizarre kit bash that absolutely nobody asked for. Golden Demon doesn't really award that kind of freedom. In a way, it rewards obsession and dedication. And yet, no matter how many reasons I had not to enter, Golden Demon never really went away. And every year, that little voice is getting louder. With every Golden Demon event, I would see the entries and feel bad that I didn't participate. Every year, I'd tell myself, maybe next year, only to never go because I just couldn't make it work. But not this time. I decided to go back to Golden Demon, and the idea is to document the whole journey. And in this first video I'm going to cover everything that goes into an entry before even a single brushstroke touches the mini. Because that's where Golden Demon entries are really made. The idea, the planning, and the composition. This is the miniature I chose. And when it came out, I instantly bought it because I just liked the whole concept. I was not entirely happy with a couple of elements, but I knew I had some ideas to lift the concept up a little, and more importantly, make it my own version, tell a bit of a story, and so on. I went into this having a vague idea. This idea is obviously already present in the base model, but there's only really two guys popping out of the ground. Let's call them Jeff and Steve. And his pose is also not really playing into the idea either, so I will have to do a bit of reposing. I'll have to reposition Jeff and Steve and most likely add a few more of their colleagues to make it more impactful. And of course, I'll have to build a base where the Lord is higher up than the skeletons he's raising. So first I had to separate Jeff and Steve from the sculpted base, and I also separated the horse and cleaned up the hooves. Before I can decide on how to piece everything back together and what conversions would have to be made, I have to assemble the main components and fill some gaps. Let's get one thing about this project straight. I have no illusions about winning at all, and there's a few reasons for that. The level of Golden Demon has constantly gotten higher and higher over the years. You can't even compare the standard of 10 years ago to the current competition, and the quality of winning entries today is absolutely insane on so many levels. Composition, color choices, technical skill, but also 3D sculpted parts and so on. Next, the category I'm entering, Fantasy Single Mini, is probably one of the most prestigious categories and therefore one of the most competitive in the entire competition. And there's a high chance Albert is going to enter another masterpiece he poured a year worth of effort into, which will leave us mere mortals fighting for the scraps. I also don't have 500 hours to pour into single miniature. I probably don't even have 200 hours to put into it, because the reality is that almost all of my hobby time is spent making videos. And I can sit and paint late into the night for weeks because my wife would leave, and I couldn't even fault her for that. And if I'm being completely honest, I don't even know what my relationship with Games Workshop looks these days. Whether that's relevant or not, I have no idea. But after years of ignoring Golden Demon's call, I finally accepted that I really want to do it again. Not because I think I'm going to win, not because I think I have to prove anything. I just want to have fun and challenge myself a little again, and most of all, enjoy the event and maybe recapture the rush of competing again in a healthier way than back in the day, with no pressure at all. The most important question when planning a Golden Demon entry is obviously, what mini should you pick? And there's all kinds of philosophies when it comes to that question. Often we hear rumors that choosing the newest, hottest release is good because it drives sales for Games Workshop. But I think that's a tinfoil hat theory and not true at all. Of course, the new releases tend to be more innovative and impressive because designers improve in their skills. So I wouldn't discard the factor this can have to create something special completely. On the flip side, you gotta be aware that everyone will have this idea, use the newly released models, and there will be a lot of these in the cabinets, so it's gonna be difficult to stand out from these. Some say you should pick something you are familiar with, something you have painted a lot. In my case, that would most likely be Space Marines. Personally, I have always went with hunches though, and this is not really different. I went for fantasy even though I mainly paint 40k. I don't really like to paint horses. Having to deal with fur texture gives me shivers, but it also means that I'm way out of my comfort zone, and this is usually where I thrive. And if nothing else, I'm sure I can learn something new here. I don't really have a rational explanation why this miniature speaks to me, but it felt right to pick it, so here we are. A part of what drew me to this miniature is the guys on the base. I just really like the way they are coming out of the earth. I just don't like how they are placed on the actual base. They look more like an afterthought. But I kinda knew this narrative had potential. I needed to separate the rising skeletons and cut away all the stuff I wouldn't need, because now I could position them freely on the base and find out where they would fit into my composition. I also made sure the main mini was going to be separated from any base detail, so I could arrange every single element I wanted in the picture. I'm doing most of the cleanup with my Fantic F2 Master. This little tool is just perfect for mini nerds like you and me. I use it in almost every one of my hobby projects, bulk converting minis, cleaning up 3D prints, or creating my own tools for sculpting or kit bash. Everything is stored in this sophisticated aluminum case, tastefully designed in gray and yellow, and it's holding and protecting the tool and the 35 bits it comes with. And when you need them, they simply pop out in this very satisfying way. And when you're done, you can just put them back and store this right at your workplace without taking up too much room. I picked up the fancy red one too, because everyone knows red goes faster. So, as you can see on screen, this tool is just invaluable when I need to shave off a millimeter of plastic quickly and in a controlled way. Getting rid of details I don't want, drilling out barrels is easier than ever. I don't even have to create the guide hole for the drill with a needle, because this is so precise, and it's also handy when I'm creating some initial shapes on these cloaks, or while building bases and plinths. Fantic has tons of other useful tools, and recently I picked up the V8 Apex handheld vacuum, weighing only 500 grams, that's 1.1 lbs in freedom units. It's the perfect vacuum to clean your hobby space or to keep your car clean. Its 4-in-1 functionality allows for vacuuming, blowing and dusting, inflating and vacuum pumping. It comes with 10 practical accessories that lets your V8 Apex adapt to any given situation. Don't be fooled by its size. It boasts an impressive 19 kilopascal of suction power, and it has a 40 minutes uptime in eco mode. The best thing is, if you follow the Amazon links in the description and use the code TMF2Master, you can grab an extra 40% off to save a total of 44% on the Fantic F2 Master. And using the code TMV8Apex, you can save a total of 46% on the V8 Apex car vacuum, which means you can grab some of the most valuable hobby tools around for the most competitive price ever. Now back to some competitive miniature composing. Ultimately, whatever strategy you use to pick your mini, one thing you have to be aware of is that you're going to spend a lot of time with the miniature you pick for your Golden Demon project. And for me, picking something challenging where I'm not just going through the motions, but have to use all my skills and brain power sounds a lot more motivating long term than something where I can turn my brain off and just paint like I always paint. And the challenge started right with deciding how I wanted to solve the puzzle this miniature offered. During the first phase, all entries have to go through: the composition. To find a good composition, I usually assemble as much as possible, so I'm gluing together as much of the mini as I can without risking not being able to reach any parts while painting. As much sub-assembly as needed, as little as possible is always my mantra. I'll always try to glue together as much as possible, but here's the thing. When assembling for competitions, what is important, at least to me, is trying to clean and prepare the models as best as I can. And that includes getting rid of undercuts. And at this point, I'm right back to the "why am I doing this to myself" mode. You'd never clean up this extensively if you wanted to paint the model for an army or for fun or for a quick YouTube video. But these parts are just awkward to paint and can drag a piece down. So taking this out will not make anyone go, "Oh wow, they fixed that undercut, isn't that awesome?" They'll most likely not even know that there was an undercut. But it eliminates a factor that could make the result worse if it stayed there. Because how do you paint these things? They're not really part of any anatomy or armor, they're just in the way. There's lots and lots of things to do before even thinking about painting or even base coating the mini. It's really important to get all the mold lines removed and all the gaps filled, because they catch light and can potentially ruin your surface blends or texture. And part of that is perfectly smoothing out the surfaces, so each pass with a higher grit sandpaper is followed by some wet sanding with a very finely grained one. All of this takes a lot of time, and I'm not going to lie, this is my least favorite part of creating competition pieces, because I enjoy none of this. Getting rid of undercuts, mold lines, gap filling, smoothing out surfaces, This is not creative work, this is just hours of boring prep work before you get to the fun part, the painting. And yet, it is absolutely necessary in an environment where every mistake will cost you points. So even though the focus in this phase is finding a great composition and arrangement, there's always the back and forth between assembly and preparing the mini and arranging and balancing the mini on the base. These things just have to go together in this stage. Now it was time to throw all the elements together. And something that really inspired me is this cover art from the Sculpt Grey Army book. I think it has some minor tweaks that make it a little more interesting than the actual mini. There's a lot more armor elements like the gold trim and the skull. The cloth on the armor is closer to what I imagine it. And I will definitely resculpt the mini closer to this. The cloak is waving in a different direction, that's something I will keep in mind, and most likely change on my model too. Also the horse is rearing in a different way. I'm not going to replicate this exactly, but I like it better than the stretched out leg. So I straight up cut that one leg at the joint and compared it to the sculpt anatomy of the second leg. And that gave me good pointers where I had to cut it shorter to make it look good when reattaching it at a different angle and making it look bent. Then I just pinned and glued this together for now. I'll fill the gaps and redo some micro details later with some epoxy putty. Next, it was time to dive into positioning the figure on the base and how I could make the raised skeletons work around it. I tried different plinth sizes and settled on this one, slightly smaller than the original base. I like to play with confined spaces and making them work. That way you have to think about every little detail that goes on and you don't fall into the trap of just overdoing it. I also like verticality in my entries because it allows for visual hierarchy and basically gives you one more dimension to play with. And obviously, it makes sense to place the rider higher than his minions. And because I like to physically play around and rearrange all the elements on my bases more than drawing sketches or other theoretical approaches, I cut a few blocks of polystyrene that I could shuffle around. This allows me to place the minis and turn the whole thing around to see how it looks as a three-dimensional piece, which is the bread and butter of miniatures, even though we usually try to find at least one money shot. I knew the rider had to be elevated, but I was unsure whether I should place them on a slope or a solid structure. That might even be reaching over the edge of the plinth maybe. Or maybe even an arch or other interesting architecture. And I gotta admit, I'm still not sure what to do. But I'm leaning towards a slope that gives way to a fractured pillar or a ruined arch, and both can create some interesting directions. Another thing that is in the artwork is how there's more of these raised skeletons around, which makes the scene more dramatic, and I wanted to replicate that. So I took my death rattle skeleton box and looked for a few poses I liked. I placed some of them on the base and tried to figure out which would create an additional interesting sense of direction or angle or any other kind of drama in combination with Chef and Steve. You'll need to help me name this third guy, so let me know in the comments. And obviously I had to cut him down a notch so he looked like coming out of the ground, and then tried to find an arrangement for the trio that would look interesting. I tried a few gimmicks, like at one point I thought maybe the banner would work, but maybe that's a bit overkill. So ultimately I think I'm going to do a spear. Long elements like this can be used to create the sense of direction or direct the eye of the viewer through your piece. Finally, I also added a slope and pushed the nameless skeleton further back and fiddled with the spear again. At this point, I haven't settled on a final position yet. I could also move the guy back a bit, clustering the three of them a bit more, looking like a wave of undead, and keeping the negative space the horse pose created. This way, I think I can also keep the direction of the cloak, only make it a little longer, so it shows protruding from the horse's silhouette in the money shot. This is my favorite phase of the process. It's like solving a puzzle. Moving the elements around until everything finally clicks together. Sometimes it's a bit more straightforward, and sometimes it takes a while. At this point, I feel like I need a bit of a counterweight in the back area, which will pronounce that negative space even more. So maybe I'm going to add a pillar like this, or I'll reposition the sword arm and use a heftier blade, which would make the area back there even more vertical. Everything is still fluid at this point, and I'm trying to get as many ideas as possible visualized. Again, we can refer back to how that raised sword arm looks in the army book cover. I'm undecided yet whether to add flames, but there's still time to do that in the resculpting phase. And one thing to consider is that while it looks good in theory, it will add a lot of additional paintwork and opportunities to screw up with the brush. And we have to weigh these cons against how much it will really add to the composition. To make the idea with the raised sword arm happen, I first had to cut the arm off. Ideally keeping as much as possible intact so it's most to just repositioning it and keeping the resculpting to a minimum. And then I switched out the blades with a little drilling and pinning again, so there would still be enough stability and the arm wouldn't just come off by accident. And I think that's my composition pretty much locked in. Let me know what you think about it. Do you like it, or would you have done anything differently? I will most likely modify this or that detail as I move into the next phase, especially when I add all the base detail. And things can really change at any phase. If some new idea pops up or a detail changes the balance of the whole piece, then I have to adapt. But for now, I like that everything is directed forward, almost like they are locked on to the enemy. I think this adds just the right amount of storytelling without overdoing the amount of minis on the base. I think we're still safe as far as this not going into diorama territory goes. This is still a lot less area and less minis than this entry that took gold in Fantasy Single in the US earlier this year, for example. In the next video, I'm going to add all the additional cloth work that will lay the foundation for the freehands, and I'll do all the sculpting work I think will improve the base model. All the additional armor detail, for example, and of course I'll show what I'm going to do for the base. Thanks a lot to all my patrons and everyone that supports me so I can make these videos, and most of all make them on YouTube so everyone can see them. If you get some kind of entertainment out of them, please consider supporting on Patreon or YouTube members. I don't like mentioning this all too often, but it really helps keeping the lights on. For now, thanks for watching and see you in the next part.